Yes.
Well, hello and welcome to the Big H podcast. My name is Mike Hayes, and today we're going to go up with another episode of Conversations with Crumb. It's going to be led by our Village of Parma and Hilton Village historian, Mr. Dave Crumb, and we have Mr. Ed Gable. Dave, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Mike. It's great to be here again tonight. And we have a special guest with us, Ed Gable. I used to call him Morrow when we were kids because his father's name was Ed. But after his father passed, he became Ed, and now we all call him Ed. So, but I'm one that remembers the Morrow part.
Yes,
So,
you do. And actually, I was Morrow all through high school. So
Yeah.
a lot of people will remember me as Morrow.
Good. Well,
Even
it's
though
good to
I've-
include that in
I've
the
forgotten.
introduction.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So Ed has lived in Hilton most of his life, and he's been active in the community. He's had a life beyond Hilton, and we're here tonight to explore some of that. He's going to tell some of his recollections. We're going to ask him a few questions, and I think we're going to have a very interesting evening. So, Ed, why don't you start off with growing up in Hilton?
Do we have enough time? Thank you. But first of all, thank you, David, Mike. I really enjoy being asked to join you tonight and talk about my hometown. And you said most of his life, I left for a while, but I was born and raised here. So I know Hilton from way back when. I was born in 1941, and at that time we were living on West Avenue in the village, 109, I think.
The oldest house in the
The
village.
oldest house in the village. Unfortunately, I don't remember an awful lot about that, except later on we learned about the history of the house. But I just can't remember anything about it really because I was just too young. 3 years old, maybe at the most, when we moved from West Avenue to Hazen Street, where we spent most of my time. But I do remember it was wartime, of course, and I do remember the dad having a victory garden. They spent a lot of time in the backyard of West Avenue, making it as it should be, and what have you. So yeah, West Avenue was big to the family, but I don't remember a lot about it, David.
That's okay.
We moved from we moved from West Avenue to Hazen Street. We're the third house in from North Avenue and South Avenue. Sorry. And there, I lived there for as much as I can remember.
All through high school.
Certainly all through high school, grade school, high school, left for college, left for Army, came back from the Army and bought a house on Ladder Road. So I was close.
Yeah.
Was there for 10, 15 years, and then moved back to Lighthouse Road in Hilton, and still there. So I've been back officially with the Hilton address for 30 years now. So Lighthouse Road has been very good to me.
Yeah.
Very nice location.
Can I ask the question? You talked about your father making a history garden or a war garden? Victory garden. Can you explain to me a little bit about that? Because I'm not aware of that.
During the war, a lot of people, in fact, the village of Hilton encouraged people to grow their own vegetables because they're hard to get. So people very often did that in their backyards, which is what we did on West Avenue. But when I was a young lad and already moved to Hazen Street, the village of Hilton, right in that little grassy area at the railroad station, had an area set around for village residents. If you wanted to grow a victory garden, come sign up. We'll give you a plot. And sure, I wanted to do that. I was game.
Yeah.
So I planted radishes.
Yeah,
I remember the day. They're easy to grow. I remember the day. We picked a radish, and there it was. And I ate the radish, and that was the first thing I ever grew myself.
Wow.
And
that is a memory.
but that was a very important part of the war era. Was victory gardens. They were all over the country.
I think the person that started that victory garden was Chuck Brand.
It was Chuck Brand.
Yes, at the high
Yes,
school.
yes. Chuck Brand was
Does that name ring a bell to you, Mike?
It does.
Yeah, he was a very well respected science teacher, and he did a lot for the community. Chuck Brand, good.
That's a good
Chuck,
memory to
Chuck Brand taught me how to play chess,
really.
and on the second game, I beat him.
How old were you?
10 or 12.
Oh,
maybe.
okay.
Did he ever play with you again, or was that?
No, he didn't.
Well, now I know in previous conversations you've told me a little bit about the Hilton Milling industrial area as a playground. Which,
Yes, it
sounds
was.
dangerous, but tell us about it.
Well, it does on the east side of the end of Hazen Street. Oh, what was back there? Hilton Milling and Warehouse, the canning factory, of course, the cold storage facility. I think there's a barrel making operation, but I'm not sure that was going with much activity back at the time I was playing there. But you're right. One of the things that when I think about back on that is today we could never do that.
No.
I mean, we could go back there and just go into the mill, for example, and there's all these machines running, these big saws, these blades 3 feet in diameter, run by big belts going up into the ceiling, and noise and sawdust. And we would just walk in. Yeah. And once in a while, one of the operators would say, maybe move a little to the side there, guys. And then he'd cut some big piece of lumber, and stuff would go flying. And it was, I thought nothing of it.
Yeah, quite a vision, really, when you think of it. To see
and I think the reason why is because we were always so careful and obedient, and we would listen and obey.
That's not on what I heard. But we'll believe it.
Yeah, all right. And one of the things that mill down there allowed us to do, the Hazen Street gang, Jerry Lewis. Remember Jerry Lewis?
Yes.
Jerry
yes.
Lewis was a member of the,
gang.
not a member of the gang. But for his lifetime, he was in the produce business at all of the village markets and stores and IGAs and Tops and whatever they changed to be over the years. Anyways, he and I were good buddies. He is the oldest person I can think of when you often you think back, you say, what was this? And you go back as far as you can remember. And when I do that, it's Jerry Lewis. He was the first person I ever really met and became buddies with. One of the differences, I think, between that era and today is how we obtained things to play with, toys or projects or what have you. And one of the things that Jerry Lewis and I used to love to do is build jitneys. Now, jitneys is a funny slang word for automobiles. In this case, little cars with wooden cars with wheels on. You can put somebody on and push around. We like to build jitneys. Much different than today, having parents buy kids, four-wheelers and motorized stuff, which is okay. That's fine today. But back then, the war was still going on. You couldn't afford that stuff. You couldn't find it anyway. So we built it ourselves. And one of the things that made that possible was the old Hilton Milling and Warehouse.
Oh, yes.
Because they had these huge barrels of cut wood, that was too small to sell or something. Well, we'd go in there and empty those barrels out and say, thank you. And you were going to go build something,
Sure.
So I think opportunities like that help people grow up.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Wonderful term. Yes, absolutely.
And with no toys, you had to figure something out.
That's right. So it was much, much different. I remember going to the cold storage building one time, and the siding, railroad siding, is still there, as is kind of the porch area on the side of the building. So the guys, we're sitting there just shooting the bull, and all little rumble of a cart goes behind us, and it's a workman, and he's bringing out a cart, and there's a box car there by the side of him. He's getting on. He looks at it and says, "You guys want some carrots?" Sure. So he reaches in this box and he throws us some carrots. He's throwing carrots at us, and we're catching them. We're eating them. They're ice cold. And that's the first time I found out that that entire building is a refrigerator.
Yes.
It's just incredible. The entire building.
Yeah, there used to be an engine room there in the building.
Oh,
You
I can.
that?
Oh, I can tell you a lot about that. I
Yeah.
love that old engine.
Big flywheel.
That remind me to
Yeah.
tell you about that a little bit. So, anyways, yeah, we do that. There's just many things that we would.
Did you wash the carrots before you ate them?
Of course not.
Good immune system.
Yeah, right. So, anyways, there's a lot of memories about that, and being able to do things that
The creek.
you wouldn't be able to do today. And I'm not saying that's wrong.
It's just change and adapting to what you have.
Yeah.
And we're lucky to have that kind of an environment. Small town, considerate people, things to do, kids to play with. And what we didn't realize, I don't think, is that the parents kind of kept a vigil over all the kids, but we didn't realize it. But there were eyes looking out of windows all the time.
Oh, yes.
Who was where.
And there were rules. I mean, nobody had cell phone, for pity's sake. They couldn't call and say, "Hey, time to come home." But the rule was the street lights. When the street lights come on, we go home.
Yep.
There's no question about it. There's no, you had to do this or, just, okay, see you guys, take off. Yeah. Street lights on, we're home. It's easy and, worked well. Sometimes we were playing, we used to play a lot of baseball. Again, unstructured. It was just a bunch of guys getting together and playing. We were either playing softball or hardball or baseball. And the reason was you'd look at each other and said, "Who's got the ball?" So, if the guy said, "I have one," if it's a baseball, we played baseball. If it's a softball, we played softball. That was the only rules we had in the entire game. And then we play. So behind the St. Paul's, they had baseball diamonds there before they built the school.
Is that the one that they use the gravestones from that little cemetery for the bases?
Oh, no,
I heard that George Stoddard did that. He was a kid, but I don't know if they got lost or not. It's a little cemetery up there behind the Lutheran Church, right on East Avenue. And there were probably a half dozen stones there at one time. And George, in his memoirs, was telling that they used to use the stones for bases, something that Ira Clapper, lot there.
Oh, yeah. Ira Clapper, yeah, sure.
Did you ever pick cherries for him?
I did pick cherries for Ira Clapper. That's the first job I ever had that was kind of structured. You had a boss, you had something you had to do. So we picked cherries for Ira Clapper.
And how much did he pay?
I think I worked 2 days for $10.
Oh, that's pretty good.
It wasn't bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't fun.
Did you eat a lot of them?
I did, which is probably something that we should not have done, but yeah.
Who were some of the kids in your gang? I know we don't know about Jerry Lewis, but there are other kids.
Yeah, the Palmers, Lenny and Larry Palmer were right around the corner on Upton Street. The Dykmans.
Yes.
Debbie was in my class of 59. Her older sister, Susan, was a friend of my older sister. Yeah, when you think about it, there were not a lot of people on Hazen Street.
What about
Smith.
The Fars?
Yeah. Oh, how could I forget Ann Farr? Yeah. Annie was a good friend of my sister, both sisters. Annie's sister,
Betty Lou.
Betty Lou, yes. She was a good friend of mine.
Now,
older sister.
Did the girls play baseball, or was it just the guys?
No.
Okay. What about your parents and some of their friends and acquaintances that you recall from way back?
I remember the Popes, Popes. The Popes lived on South Avenue. You could see their house looking down our second story windows through the Burke's backyard, and there were the Popes. And then, of course, I don't know, there's just way too many to remember. The social activity of my mom, especially, was quite good because of Hilton. Hilton had a lot of things going on for mom and people of her age and what have you. One of them was the book club.
Oh my gosh!
Book club was huge in Hilton, so she was very active in that. I was to a certain extent because I had to deliver the books.
Oh,
so
and the orange
Morrow,
trays.
take these to someone, and I go deliver the books to the next person in line for the lend lease of the.
Remember those orange trays that they used to?
The orange trays.
You had to take those with the books.
I did. I had to deliver those to the next hostess for the book club meetings.
And you had to clear the house if your mother was entertaining. You weren't allowed to stay around for book club.
We could stay in the house. Dad and I often went down in the basement and worked on something. And there'd come a time, well, you got to put a nail in this. So he's pounding a nail in something, and mother would, be quiet down there. Okay, we forgot.
I remember we had to clear the house. My father and I go to the movies.
Oh, good.
Go to Louis for a hamburger or something.
Oh, yeah. You go to
and up at the Greeks, and I have a sundae, like a Mexican.
Ooh, their Mexican sundaes are famous.
His ice cream was to die for.
Yes. You go to the Hiltonia?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, good.
To the Hiltonia. And there are 2 seats from the Hiltonia, and I just want to get this into the program that your parents saved after it closed.
Yes,
and they were acquired later by Larry Gerstlin, and he enjoyed them for some years, and then he brought them up here, and they were in the office here for a few years, and then we took them to the museum where you registered them, and they were courtesy of the Gable family originally.
Yes.
That's seat number 1 and 2.
Yes,
I always thought the seats were quite commodious there, but when I sat down on those after going to movies at Tinseltown and various places, I thought, my gosh, we've come a long way.
Yes.
These were wooden seats, but they're quite a relic.
Yes, indeed.
Now, both you and I attended that 75th anniversary of the Hilton Book Club about 5 years ago.
Oh, we did.
As children of the
founders or something.
Founders, yeah.
Yeah.
And Jeannie Colomer was there, and Carol Raleigh, I believe, Carol Raleigh Palmer.
Yes.
It was quite an interesting event, and we were all asked to stand up and talk about what we could recall of that.
Yeah.
They had their 75th anniversary for a book club. They could have 24 people in the book club. Only 24, and you were vetted before you went in. You couldn't just say, I want to join. They checked you out. Call J. Edgar Hoover.
Background check?
Yes.
And
then they'd pair people up. So in January, it might be Mrs. Gable and Mrs. Luffman as the hostesses, and you go to one or the other of their house. In March, it might be Mrs. Crumb and Mrs. Wayne going to one of their houses, and they get their best stuff out. Linen, silver, flowers, the whole thing, lots of desserts, and all the guys had to get out of the house and go somewhere. But you could come back just a little bit before it ended and
just to get dessert.
If you could get some of those desserts. Anyway,
my sister Dee was, and both sisters actually were very active members of the book club. And my sister, when she moved to California, San Francisco, she started the West, what's the right word? Version West.
Hilton Book Club West, wasn't it?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah,
anyway, she started a chapter.
Chapter.
She started the West chapter of the Hilton Book Club in Oakland, California.
Is it still going?
It is. Even though Dee is now in Seattle, Washington, she has friends down there that keep it going.
That's
So,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, these book clubs, I think, added a lot of culture to the community. And there wasn't just that one that we're talking about. There were 2 or 3 other book clubs.
Yes.
So the people were keeping themselves informed, learning to read, not learning, but reading good books and having speakers come from other areas to enlighten us, especially during the war.
Yeah, the Hilton
Yeah.
chapter of something foreign affairs.
Oh yeah, what about
Yeah.
that Hilton World Affairs?
World affairs,
We've got files in the office here.
I've
Came
seen
and
some
looked
of
them up
those. Yeah.
once.
I mean, they were really serious about understanding what is going on with the, well, toward the end of the war and then the Cold War and what have you. And they were very active, very studious, talking about it amongst themselves, having guest speakers, including, Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt
Yes,
came to Hilton, New York to talk to the Hilton chapter of the
World Affairs.
Yeah. And they took me along.
Pardon?
And they took me along.
Did
I was
they?
there. I
Oh, my
saw.
gosh. Eleanor.
I don't remember. I didn't know what was going on, but it doesn't matter. It was a big deal to them, and rightly so. They really had something going there.
Well, they brought this intelligence in, and we didn't have TV like we have it today, and there was no cell phone, no, information. You had to go after it, and this organization brought it in for the community.
Yes.
And that speaks well for the village. And the teachers, a lot of the school administrators, village fathers, all supported it. So that it was, I didn't go to anything. I think you know more about it than I do, but someday I'm going to investigate those files.
Yeah, my mom was very active in it. I think yours was too.
Probably,
sure. Yeah, probably. My mom and his mom were very active in different things in the village together.
Speaking about your parents, what did they do for an occupation? Your mom and dad?
Well, it's interesting. The reason I'm here, the reason I'm a Hilton resident, is because of my dad's occupation. He worked as a troubleshooter for the tell me again.
Smithfield.
For the Smithfield Canning Company. Okay. Canning Company, which is a large organization. We think of it as Hilton, but it was a large organization. And his job was to go around and troubleshoot. Something's not working right here. Something's not working here. So his job is to go fix things. He was a fixer. And they weren't just little trips. He would be gone long enough where they get rid of a house, they buy a house or apartment, or they move. So they came to Hilton. He fixed the problem. And next job, he told my mother, "Okay, we're moving again." And she said, "No, we're not." So I'm just not moving again. I like Hilton. I like the people. I like what they're doing. I feel part of it here. We're staying. No, wasn't a question.
Another job.
Yeah, we're staying here. So he said, okay, and got a job, very successful job with Kodak. He was an engineer, graduated from University of Illinois. So he was very capable and able to move around and what have you. So that's how we stayed in Hilton. And
that would have been what, about 1945?
Oh no, much earlier.
43.
Oh, one.
That'd
be 40.
Well, that's when you were born.
Yeah. I was a toddler. Thing when we moved into West Avenue.
Footnote on Smithfield's. Smithfield, as Ed said, was a large company. Hilton was just one of the branches. It was out of Lindenville, I believe, and Charlie Nichols, who was formerly the assistant historian here, His grandmother's brother, I believe, owned it. His name was William Smith. And Charlie's father, Walt Nichols, also worked there at Smithfield's. And so it has some interesting background. Before Smithfield's, so it was called Peck and Pratt.
Okay.
And Smithfield's came in and bought them. But that was one of our big industries here with the apple business.
Yes, yes, indeed. And because of the railroad.
Well, you mentioned the Dykeman family. You used to go over there, and you're one of the few people that I know that remembers our Titanic survivor, May.
Oh, May, yes.
Can you comment a little bit about that?
Well, I can, only in the fact that, yeah, we used to go to the Dykmans. We'd have a play date over there, whatever you call it nowadays. And so we'd go over, we'd play and what have you, and very often we'd be served lunch. So you think, you grow up and you think of a household. You got a mother, a father, some kids, and what have you. Well, the Dykmans, it was always mother, father, the kids, and this other person.
The mystery person.
And this other person, May, would serve lunches, and she was very nice, very kind, very thoughtful, nice to be around, but that's all.
No, she never mentioned the Titanic.
Oh, no, never. And neither did the family until much later, too. But yeah, that's all I remember is this very nice other person in the family. And yeah, that was her. I guess she came in as a house maid or whatever the proper term
They
was.
needed help in the Dykeman family because she was there for 2 generations. She was there for Mrs. Dykeman's mother and father, and that would be Reverend Randall Kenyon, and he had some kind of an illness that would affect him from time to time. Mrs. Dykeman or Mrs. Kenyon had her hands full with 5 children, and so they brought May in from Albion, where she was living, and to help. And she liked it there, and stayed for the next generation, and everybody loved her. So it was a good thing. Ed, another thing that I recollect from my memories is that you used to know Paul Rood, who had the first television and radio shop in Hilton down on East Avenue in the old IGA building, or that would be called the Curtis Block or Iveson's. And I remember it was a little door near the fire department.
Yeah, right.
And there was a window maybe.
Next to the fire department.
But
big window.
You were in and out of there, and that seems to be the foundation of your interest in technology.
It certainly was. I had an interest in technology way before that, actually. That would, when Paul started that business, 1957, I was a sophomore in high school and had already an interest. I had already gotten my ham radio license, and Paul was a ham, so that was helpful. And talk a little bit about work opportunities in Hilton at that time. I'm a little surprised that it was quite plentiful. I could get a job almost anywhere I wanted to. Technically, not. I mean, there are a lot of people at the farm. God bless Ira Clapper and all the jobs he offered, and all of the farmers all over town. But there were others. Clyde Robillard had a nice jewelry shop in the Michael's department store. You have a corner with his business there.
Pleasure shop. No technology there.
No. So Clyde wanted a helper.
Okay.
And he asked around the school. He said, "Do you know anybody that might be interested in this type of thing?" And the school said, "Yeah, why don't you ask Morrow Gable, see what he might want to do that." So I said, "Great." So he asked me and said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to do something like that and learn a trade and what have you." There was a problem. I wasn't 16 yet, and you had to have a work permit or whatever the proper documents were at that time. So Clyde did not hire me, and I missed that opportunity. But the next opportunity was with Paul Rude, and he didn't care about things like work permits or what have you. So, yeah, I already, as I say, was interested in electronics, and repairing radios and TVs was kind of just something I just fell into.
And that would have been about 1957?
57, yeah.
57. And televisions had been out for, what, about 9 years, 10 years?
Yeah. Still black and white.
Still black and white. Halo Light.
Halo Light by Sylvania. Yeah. Paul also sold TVs and radios there. Cape Art brand, not a big name on the East Coast, but big on the West Coast. I learned much later. But Paul was very good to me. He put a lot of trust in me. He let me open the store at night, all alone, and I didn't do much more than bring items in or deliver items, what have you. But
televisions back then were your most valuable asset. I remember somebody left their television with us when they went to Florida because they were afraid somebody would come in and steal it.
Really?
And we didn't have one. And I got to watch Howdy Doody and Buffalo Bob and Coke Time. There were about 3 things you could watch, a few cartoons.
Yeah.
And then they came home from Florida. And my father finally anteed up and bought one.
Yeah. Yeah, but Paul, as I say, was very good.
Now, he just passed away a few years ago, as I recall.
He left Hilton. I was surprised. He left the TV business in Hilton and the Rude's Dairy, and then I thought he had just left town, and he did, but he went to Pittsburgh.
Oh,
he went to Pittsburgh to teach school.
Oh.
I don't know where he got his teaching certificates or whatever was required back then, but he taught school in the Pittsburgh School District, and he taught shop classes. And evidently the people loved him. He found his niche, what he should be doing all his life at an older time. And then he gets retired. He moved in with his daughter and then moved to Florida, lived there for a long time, and then passed away.
I think that he was up in his 90s, maybe.
He was, yeah.
It was quite a while. But we never heard from him after the 60s, I guess. But it seemed to me it was like 2010. Charlie Nichols and I were talking about it, and we learned that he had just passed away.
Uh-huh.
And so, well.
Can I ask a quick question?
Certainly.
We have some younger viewers or listeners out there. Describe to them what a ham radio is.
Oh, thank you.
Here we go. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's start.
Take a nap.
Take a nap.
Back to you.
That's good.
When you're a ham radio operator, typically you're an enthusiast about radio communications. Personal radio communications, not CB or that type of thing. It's a very well regulated activity. In order to be a ham radio operator, you have to pass a test before the Federal Communications Commission that's used to be both technical and learning Morse code. Today, you don't have to learn Morse code any longer. They decided, well, that's no longer necessary. But when you get your ham license, then you can go on the air with your, either in my time, you would build your own transmitters and receivers and what have you, and put it on the air, and you would talk to fellow ham radio operators literally anywhere in the world. Not everybody could do that, but as you advanced, you could do a lot of very interesting talking on the air. Either I still use Morse code.
Mm-hmm.
I love
it. You're probably the last person in Hilton that can do Morse code.
Oh,
we have a Morse code that Ed set up in the historical museum up there, and the kids love to tap on it.
Yeah.
But they don't know any more than I do or you do. Mm-hmm. What all those long shorts. But Ed does, and that's an amazing thing because Lynn Paxson, who was our depot dispatcher years ago, won the prize as the champion Morse code dispatcher in Western New York or something like that.
Yes.
So That's amazing that you could do that and send messages out. Are there people at the other end that can receive them still?
Oh, sure,
Oh,
sure.
are there?
It's
Okay.
still,
Still
even though
works.
it's not required any longer, it's kind of a personal pride thing.
Yeah.
I used to have what they call a great fist. The fist is the ability to send Morse code on the key very accurately with good timing, and so anybody at the other end that knew the code could copy it with ease. And I was very good at that. Today I have arthritis, and I'm not so good at that. So sometime in the future, a keyboard is in my future. You type it on a keyboard, and out comes a Morse code.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is. It's okay.
Explain a little bit about Morse code. What the code is like. What is A?
Morse code is a grouping of dits and dots and dashes. A short character, dit. A long character would be a dash, da, sounds like da da. And then there's, of course, 26 of those for every letter of the alphabet. So
you have to memorize those.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're going like this, your memory's going right along with it. It's like typing, and you hit the right keys.
I can send with a key faster than I can type. The record speed is, I think, 62 words a minute for receiving. It's easier to send than receive, but it's just a blur.
Who invented the Morse code?
Alfred Vail. Everybody thinks Morse code
I was going to say
was Morris, but no, it was a man named Alfred Vail.
Samuel F.B. Morse, M-O-R-S-E, not M-O-R-I-S. M-O-R-S-E. That was like in 1856, wasn't it?
Morris got his first job in telegraphy in 1844.
Oh, wow.
Where he sent "What hath God wrought" was the first message ever sent in Morse code, and it was sent from Baltimore to Washington, D.C.
And that's how we communicated back in those days. The railroads, to send telegrams and things. Is that correct?
Yes.
I mean, that's how train's going to be late, or there's a snowstorm, or whatever you want to tell people. It's,
the biggest problem Morris had, this 1844 transmission, was a contract with the government. The government says, if you can do that, we'll think more of this and probably give you some more contracts. Well, it was the first time it was ever done. And they had to run a telegraph line from Washington to Baltimore. So the first thing they did was take a compass and did, let's see, it's that way. We have that compass in our museum. It's incredible item. And then they said, okay, well, let's get some wire. Where to get wire? Well, nobody built wire.
Yeah.
There were no electrical things. There was no such thing as wire. So they bought some barbed wire. And anyways, they had a lot of trouble, but they accomplished an awful lot. So Morse turned into wireless Morse, which is radio. And then that turned into interest by a hobbyist, and that turned into ham radio.
Didn't Rochester have one of the largest ham radio organizations in the country?
Yep. In the 70s and 80s, it was a very large. The Rochester Amateur Radio Association was huge.
I remember when we were talking once about Buzz
Bacon. Yeah.
Who was a friend of yours.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your recollections of Bus.
Bus Bacon ran a bar.
Yeah. Where?
And then right at the corner, 259 and 104.
Up at Bacon's Grill.
Bacon, yeah. And I was still pretty young then when I knew him, and at that location. I remember he had a great big transmitter, a piece of World War II surplus. I don't know where he got it. I don't care where he got it. All I know is there it was.
Oh, my gosh.
Huge. Very impressive.
Was it at the bar?
Yeah, right off the bar. Right off the bar. So I'm in there one time, and he's talking to somebody, and they're having a good time. And all of a sudden they hear this thump. What was that? He said, "Oh, don't worry, the transmitter just blew up again. I'm sitting right by it." He said, "It's okay. Throw that switch. Now throw that switch. That switch. Now throw that switch." Bing, bong. Came back on, and he started talking again.
Let's have another beer.
Yeah, he was quite. There's a story about Bus and what he did after the war when the U.S. soldiers were stuck all over the universe. They were stuck in the South Pacific especially. They couldn't get out. There weren't enough planes or boats to get the GIs off the islands. And he felt really bad about that. So he took this big old transmitter that he had, and he convinced the government that, why don't we take my transmitter and your transmitters, which are still on the islands and not doing anything, and we'll let people over on the islands talk to their family back in the U.S.
Wow.
And they said, well, yeah, okay, why don't we do that? So he did. Bus Bacon did that with his transmitter, his personal owned equipment, and cooperation with the government. He let arrange for the GIs to talk to people back and forth in the U.S.
That's a great piece
Amazing.
of history.
And it's just this little guy and
up in Parma Grill.
Parma Grill, yeah.
Bacon's Parma Grill.
Nobody knows what happened to any of that. There's no documentation. Today, we can't find anything to support that, but I was there. I saw the transmitter. I saw the antenna. He had a big antenna. He could talk to the South Pacific with that transmitter, that antenna. So he could do that, but I can't find any proof of that.
He later, after he sold the Parma Grill, he moved up to Manitou Beach Road. Do you recall that?
I don't know.
I know a friend, John Palmer, knew him from up in that area. Maybe John might know something.
Maybe.
Get John up here some night and compare notes.
Yeah.
Yes, that Parma Grill is full of history, but that what you brought up is most important and interesting to catch up.
Now, as it turned out later on, that activity became what's called MARS, Military Affiliate Radio System. And many years later, along came some bad stuff going on in the Middle East and Operation Desert Storm and what have you. And I joined Army Mars. I just said, I'm going to do this. So we got a hold of the company I worked for, Harris Corporation, sold military units to the Army, all the military. They had transmitters in country that weren't being used. The military Mars group that could make all this work got together with people in the Far East mostly and said, can you get some transmitters that are available? And I said, yeah. Okay, I got transmitters available with another group of avid people there at Harris. And we put this together and we formed a link so that GIs in the Middle East could talk to their families back home. And most of it was all over the country. So most of it was out of Hilton, Rochester, New York area.
Wow.
But Christmas of Desert Storm, I handled, I'll never forget the number, 12,621 pieces of traffic.
Wow.
For the GIs.
You didn't have time for Christmas then.
Well, it was pretty automated.
I hope you got a thank you note or something.
I have an award from the government.
That's great.
And it was an automated mode. It wasn't as much talking then, so you could type a message.
Sure. But important to let them communicate with their families.
But Harris Corporation deserves a ton of credit for the hardware and the people.
Now, was that kind of your idea to get that going? based on what you'd done with Blood or what Bacon had done?
No, that was the Mars system.
Yeah, okay.
Did that. That's what they did. They communicated all over the world ever since the end of World War II, but certainly Korea, Vietnam. It was huge. They just let GIs communicate back home. It was a wonderful movement.
That was probably around 89, Desert Storm. It's in the 90s.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
How soon we forget, yeah.
Ed, I don't want to, this is really interesting, the ham radio, but I don't want to forget one other important thing, Henry. Can you tell us about Henry?
I love to talk about Henry. Henry was our pet dog when we lived on Hazen Street. And I have to correct that a little bit because Henry wasn't our pet dog. Henry found my sister. And Henry followed my sister down Main Street, down Hazen Street, down home. She walked in the house, turned around, and there was this dog that was following her.
Oh.
Said, "Hi, dog." And she went in the house. The next morning, she goes out. The dog is there. The dog follows her to high school. She comes out of high school. No dog. Okay. Walks home, about halfway home, down West Avenue. The dog gets behind her and follows her home.
Yeah.
Next day, it was my turn. I walk into school. The dog gets behind me and just follows me up to school. Follows me home. Looks at me. They say, "Hi, dog." And that was all I had to say. From then on, Henry chose us.
Wow. And nobody
he just
claimed him?
We had no idea. He didn't have he had a collar with no tag.
I remember him having long hair.
Oh, it was long. He was a sheepdog.
Yeah.
And we never knew. Somebody thought he was a Poolie. I don't know what a Poolie sheepdog is, but somebody did. They said, "Oh, that looks like a Poolie." So Henry lived with us forever, and he had the regular routine. He would follow us to school every morning, make sure we got to school. And then,
what do you do while you're in school?
Oh, he had a routine. So he'd make sure we were all right. He'd walk downtown. He'd go to the IGA. Scratch on the door. The butcher would open the door, throw Henry a bone. Henry was great. This is wonderful. So he devoured the bone, and then he would go downtown to the post office. The post office was on right downtown, Main Street
next
downtown.
To the pleasure shop.
Next to the pleasure shop.
Blanche Randall was the postmistress.
There you go. And Henry would sit down right in the doorway. So if you wanted to get mail, which you did, because that's what you had to do, you had to go pick up your mail. "Oh, hi, Henry." And then we'd pet Henry, and he would just love it. But he'd just sit there for hours, and people would step over and think nothing of it. "Oh, it's Henry." And then in the afternoon, somehow, he never wore a watch. I don't know how he did it, but he'd be at the school exactly the right time. Huh. If there wasn't a baseball game going on, he would follow us home. If there was a baseball game going on, he loved to play baseball. Not play, but watch baseball. And he was remarkable. I don't know how, but he knew not to bother anybody. If there's a foul ball, he loved to chase balls, but he wouldn't chase a foul ball during the game. He knew to stay away. And when that was over, then he'd come home. And
he ate well, didn't he?
Yeah. He was as they say, the town dog. Everybody knew Henry until one day Hilton, for whatever reason, decided that they had to pass a dog leash law. And that, well, I think it literally killed him.
Broke his heart.
So he was so good. The dog catcher would drive down the street. Henry would be walking away, just having a good, just so happy. And the dog catcher would stop away and open the bag and say, Here, dog. Oh, yeah, I'm going for a ride. Yeah. And he'd jump in the back of the wagon,
Oh my gosh.
and he'd be locked up the
Oh.
night. And they called Dad, and he had to go pay $5 or whatever it was and get the dog out of jail.
Where was the pound?
Some guy's basement on West Road. I forgot where. I had to go there a couple of times. Dad got really, really ticked off one time. Because one time, Dad is on the front porch reading the paper. Front porch is a wonderful thing back then.
Oh, yeah.
And just having a little good old time. And Henry was right there, right below the little bush in the front yard. On our yard. And the dog catcher went by. Evidently, it was a slow day. He stopped the car and said, "Come on, Henry, come on." And Henry got up, left the yard, went across the street, said, "Hi," jumped in the car.
Oh, my gosh.
$5.
$5.
Oh, Dad got livid. He was so mad. He went down. "You know what you're doing, catcher, Daddy." Well, anyways, Henry died winter of, I forget, it doesn't matter.
Well, I was in
Shortly
college.
after that, because
I
he,
can almost tell you because I was in college. And it was like, it came out in the Hilton record.
it was in the Hilton records.
62, I think. Because I showed my fraternity brothers.
Oh,
And there was Henry's obituary on the front page of the Hilton record. This is down in Florida. They couldn't believe that a town like this existed.
yeah,
A dog. They
yeah,
were from bigger cities in Florida and things. And
yeah.
I'm telling them about this small town up in New York, and there's Henry's obituary. They thought that was.
Yeah. Anyway, Henry still, we let him out when it was, just wrong.
Yeah.
So we let him out once in a while. This time, winter ice across Salmon Creek was not quite frozen over. And he walked across, boom, went through the ice. And
He drowned?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was the end of Henry. And but you're right, the first obituary in the Hilton record.
For a dog.
For a dog.
Everybody's obituary was on the front page.
Oh, yeah. That
Never had a dog
that was
before.
big news.
But he was well known in the community.
Yeah.
And I remember him, and he had long hair. We all petted him if he went by. He was friendly to everybody.
Oh, everybody.
And people on Main Street looked forward to seeing him. He wasn't a nuisance.
Mhm.
So it's a piece of history.
Sure.
Yeah,
Something
indeed.
to remember. Well, Ed, you also served in the military. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was pretty unremarkable, actually. I volunteered for the service, took training in electronics and the Nike Hercules missile system. Got pretty good at that. Not something you do every day, but I got stationed in northern Italy at a missile base there, supporting Southern European Task Force, it was called. Worked there. I had a regular normal 8 to 5 job, office job. It was
Nice.
Really.
Did you get to travel around a little bit?
A little bit. Whenever I had anything major planned for travel, something would go really bad. Bad storms, floods, something, and never got a chance to go. But so one day I'm sitting in my office, and the first thing I do is pick up the local military newspaper, and I'm reading the paper. And it's just stuff going on in the service and all that, and it's sort of offside in the front page of the Stars and Stripes newspaper said, "Major fire in Hilton, New York." I mean, this is a paper
You're
in
sitting
northern
in
Italy.
Your hometown is under siege.
I couldn't believe it. Must have been a slow news day in northern Italy. Anyways, that's how I found out about the Hilton
Now,
fire.
did you wire home or call home or anything to see what was going on? Or?
No, I guess we didn't think it was a big deal. Oh, the third time. Fourth time, Hilton burned down.
Always
Okay.
burns down. Did your mother write to you about it?
Sure. And sent newspaper clippings and what have you. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. What about college and career?
All local. In electronics, the standard thing to do is 2 years AAS and then 2 years for a BS at RIT, and that got you your bachelor's degree. So you did that, and then I took. Later on, I was doing a lot of management work at Harris, so I decided I needed some management stuff. So I went to St. John Fisher Night School and did some of that. So it was all local, and yeah, school was very good. Military paid for a lot of it, so yeah, it was
Super.
good.
That
Yeah,
was
it was very
great.
good, very good.
And then your first job?
Harris,
Harris.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And you were there for how long?
32 years.
Oh, wow. It's a good long tenure. And did you retire from Harris?
I did. I took a. I knew I wanted to do at age 55. I got everything in order, finances and plans and what have you. And I went to Harris and said, I'm going to retire. So I retired at age 55.
Wow.
And I retired at age 55 because I wanted to become curator of a museum.
Ah,
And I did. I took over the curator at the Antique Wireless Museum in Bloomfield, New York.
and you were
Was
there.
having trouble and he was ill. They were looking desperately to find a replacement curator, and I said, I'll do it.
Wonderful.
So I was curator there for about 10 years.
That's still
Yeah.
going.
Oh, is it ever? When I started there, my annual budget for the museum, I think, was $17,000. Today it's $4 million.
$4 million. Oh my gosh. Wow.
It's just an outrageously good museum.
And they have named a room for you down there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they did. It was a new wing they built for ham radio
Okay.
equipment, and they named that the Ed Gable, not Memorial. I'm still here. So that was very nice.
Yeah. Now that's something that listeners in the future might enjoy seeing. It's. Do you want to tell us where it is?
Sure, it's on right on Route 5 and 20 in Bloomfield, New York. 6925 Route 5 and 20 at the corner of Route 444.
And is it open regularly, or do they special hours?
Every Tuesday and Saturday right now, but that could be subject to change. It's an outrageously good museum. The collection, it's the history of electronic communication. So it's everything from the telegraph,
Yes.
1844, through cellular radio,
Okay.
cell phones, and what have you. That's all radio communication.
So they're keeping examples of all the cell phones that have come along the way, and so you can.
Not only some of them, but we have the world's first cellular telephone,
Wow.
serial number 0001.
Wow.
We're very, very proud of that. We have the world's first transistor radio that the public would own and will listen to on the beach. Built by the Bell telephone industry.
Hmm.
They were the inventors of
What
the
date would
transistor.
that be for a transistor?
1952.
52.
So anyway, it goes on and on and on, and it's more than just artifacts and what have you. We really try to do the very best we can at collecting all of the history, whether it be hardware, whether it be people and their achievements. And one of the things that we learn to do, museums are changing. Museums are finding it harder and harder to attract people to plop down $10 or $20 and go look at old stuff. it's a huge change for museums.
Yeah.
We have learned how to do that very well. And that is to use your collection to aid in serving the community. And something that surprised the heck out of me, might be easy for you in the education business. One of the things that we can do is use all of the skilled people and historians we have to teach this information to certain people who need it. And a big surprise to me was how many people out there need it. And that is how formal the home education process is. And there's so many people that have trouble teaching STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. And so we've learned how to do that using our resources.
Well, that's
So
a
I
great
started
community
teaching
service.
STEM classes. Loving it.
Oh, that's great.
Loving it. But let me tell you, here we go. Take a deep breath. One of the things that I noticed in growing up in Hilton and talking about, we always had some kind of a support structure. Maybe it wasn't formal in a lot of cases, like starting the Card Kings Hot Rod Club and stuff like that, but we always had some kind of support. We always had parents around to teach us how to do things. Let me get to the point here. In one of the very first STEM classes I taught, we were just building a code practice oscillator. Interesting enough, and we had to take a wire and put it on a board and put a screw in the board and tighten the screw and do that several times and hook some wires together and make this work. I had to stop the class that we're doing because we couldn't get past the step of put the wire around the screw head, take a screwdriver, and tighten the screw, because the kids did not know how to use a screwdriver.
Oh my.
And that just blew me away. And I had to rethink an awful lot.
Mhm.
And one of the things I thought about was, Hilton, do you think my father would ever let me out the door without knowing how to use a screwdriver? Good Lord, no. And I just wonder what went wrong between then, between growing up in Hilton and growing up in Bloomfield many years later, not knowing how to use a screwdriver. It's just so incredible.
Do they have shop classes still? I don't know.
I think they do. I think it's elective type of shops. I know there's a big robotics club now in the high school, which is very popular too.
Oh, sure.
But I can see not just in, screwdriver, many disciplines. You're like, I'm so surprised. Maybe kids don't know how to use cursive handwriting.
Oh, yes.
Yes. It's very, very unfortunate. And I don't know where we went wrong in some respects, but
some schools are picking up cursive again, and of course we've got Leanna Hale up at the Clarkson Historical Society.
Oh, she's teaching it.
Teaches it in August to fourth graders.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating, Ed, and that I sadly to say I have not been to the Antique Wireless, but that's going to be one of the first things on my list
good
to do and go down and see that. But then there's the Parma Hilton Historical Society, which you have deep roots in. So tell us about that.
Well, I was talking to Jim Stilson one time, the curator of 10 years ago and a little later. And we were just talking about museum stuff, because by then I had retired as curator of the AWA Museum, but was still very busy and very active. And one of the things I did for the AWA was do a lot of working with the state of New York, who regulates all museums. And I got all of the paperwork, started and ready and what have you for the chartering of the museum, the AWA museum. And in talking to Jim, I found out that they had never quite finished everything they needed to do to get the the PHHS museum, fully chartered. So I worked with him on that, and I rewrote several other procedures and documents, what have you. Just late last year, I had finished all that, turned it into the state. Everything was fine. And I looked at myself and said, my job is done.
Wow.
So I retired from PHHS, loved it, loved the people, but decided I would do something else.
Other things.
Yeah.
That's well, we certainly miss you there, and but you certainly left quite a contribution as registrar and also curator. You were there for what, about 15 years?
10, I think, closer to 10, almost exactly 10 years.
10 years. I think you were there before I got in the picture. I'm sure you were, because I think I joined in 208, something like that. No, I think I was more like 212. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I also want to comment about your family was involved in Historical Society.
Yeah. Both my mom and dad were charter members.
1969.
Yeah. And let's see, mom was a charter board member or some office. But anyways, yeah, they were active very early in the society.
Lola Heinrich was also very instrumental there.
Yes, she was. She was very active. She had a lot of business sense. She was a treasurer of the Ogden Telephone Company, so had a lot of business sense, and she brought that to the Historical Society. And, they did very well. Are doing very well.
Was she the manager of Ogden Tel, or the business manager? Treasurer, that's right. Mm-hmm. She worked for Maxine Davison.
Yes, she did.
And that's when the Ogden Tel is an interesting little point, because before we had our system that we have today, Rochester Tel, or I'm not sure who runs it, but we had Ogden Tel from Spencerport.
Yes.
And before that, we had the Hilton Telephone Company.
Yep.
Let's go back and talk about that a little bit, because a lot of people, just aren't aware of it. The Hilton Telephone Company was up over the drugstore on Lake Avenue.
And that's for the operators.
And we had local ladies who were the operators. And some of them were like Elva Paulson, Cora Cox, Mabel Goodwin.
Yeah. Edith Burke.
Yes, Edith Burke. And there were probably 8. There was a cadre, and they would all keep it going 24/7, I guess.
Yes, indeed.
And then Cora Cox, who lived down on Hazen Street, she had something to do with the fire department. When somebody would call in, it would be Mrs. Cox who would
answer the radio.
Yes.
Yeah. When the county of Monroe went to a wide area fire dispatching system, Cora Cox was the dispatcher in Hilton, only because the family allowed her to put an antenna on the roof.
Yep.
And a radio set in her bedroom, and she would have to answer that 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And if there was a fire needed the Hilton Fire Department, they would call on the radio. Cora Cox would answer, and
she's very efficient.
Then it would start. Yeah.
She'd done it for years, and I believe her son Frank also helped out.
Yes, indeed.
But I remember my mother one time. She said she was at a bridge party, and the fire whistle used to blow. Oh my God, it was a siren. Everybody jumped. You can remember that, Mike. And I don't know why it doesn't blow anymore, but anyway, maybe we don't have any fires, but fingers crossed. But when that fire whistle went, everybody pricked up their ears and began to look around. And
my mother
said, well, I'll call Mrs. Cox and she'll tell us where it is because, he just wanted to know. And so she called and she said, Mrs. Cox, can you tell me where the fire is? She says, well, I think it's up on South Hill. Let me look out the window. Yes, it is up on South Hill. And they're throwing pillows out the window right now. My mother told me that story. And, that's how small our town was.
Do you know what weird thing is in this very building that we're sitting in right now?
I think I know, but I'll let you tell us.
The thought of this happening at any other time in the world is just amazing. But in this building, right, 200 feet that way and down 8 feet, basement, is a gun shooting range.
Yep.
Inside the school.
Yep. They used to have a fire.
So here's a story, an actual story I remember between a student and a faculty member. They're just chatting before class starts. Student says, hey, guess what? I got a new Browning shotgun for my birthday. And the teacher said, is it the automatic one? He said, yeah. I said, boy, I haven't seen one of those yet. Oh, I'd love to see one. Why don't you bring it in tomorrow? I said, okay. So the kid goes home, gets up in the morning, puts his shotgun in a case, carries it on the bus, gets off the bus, into school. He won't see the teacher until later in the day. He puts the gun in the locker. When it's time to see the teacher, he takes the gun out of his locker, goes in and says, here it is. And nobody thought anything about it.
The teachers say, let's go down and try it out.
I'm sure they probably did, yeah. But I don't know what happened after that.
It was an innocent time.
Right.
Oh, boy, wasn't it? Yeah, wasn't it?
And how fast it changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily saying that's a good thing.
No.
I wouldn't change anything from what they're doing today, but boy, yeah. It's just such a different world.
Different world, and we lived through it.
Yeah.
And I remember my parents saying, oh, I think we've seen more changes in our lifetime than anybody would ever see, from going from horse and buggy to automobiles and state, international highways, flying, to Europe, all those things. It's incredible. Going to the moon, television, radio. Yeah. It's an amazing time. And now with technology, AI.
Yeah.
This is, I was on my cell phone today looking for some things, and pretty soon things came up, so this might help you because I see what you're interested in. And it was very helpful.
Yeah.
I didn't have to go, searching is becoming much more efficient. And I'm beginning to access music on my cell phone. When I want to listen to something, and I hadn't done that before. This is just in the last 2 weeks. I'm suddenly lighting up to some of this opportunity. Amazing. But Ed, with your incredible beginning with Paul Rood and going to becoming head of the International Wireless Association, if I'm not mistaken, International Ham Radios. You've seen it all and done it all. And now you're going to do new things.
I hope so.
Yes.
We'll work in my workshop.
What is it going to be? A1 or AI?
I used AI for the first time 2 weeks ago. Every couple times a month, I write an article for it on Facebook for ham radio stuff through the society. Through the Historical Society. And I've always, just sat down and thought of a subject and then did some research. I said, I'm going to try this. So I went to the AI site and I just said, informal, 1 paragraph, subject on new technology in ham radio, period. That's all I put in.
They wrote the article.
4 seconds later, there was a complete paragraph talking about the future of ham radio in different topics and what have you. It was a little more flowery and less technical than I would have used, but it was dead nuts on.
Huh.
It was absolutely perfect. I changed a few words that made it too personal, too flowery. I changed a few words
You could enable
to make it more technical.
Yeah.
I typed my editor, said attach, pressed the button, job was done.
Wow.
I sat there like this because I've been writing. This is interesting. I've been writing articles for the Rah Rah Ray. They have a monthly publication, so it's two members, and it's local news on ham radio and what have you. And I write the history, a history column, and I have had an article in every single issue of the Rah Rah Ray for the last 55 years.
Wow. Every month? Oh my gosh, yeah. Talk about consistency.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So I don't think AI is going to do history very well.
We're probably going to use your history.
I can write those articles very well because all I need is some ideas.
Yeah.
And then, oh yeah, I was there. So you type about it, but but yeah, years and years and years. I've worn out, I think, 3 electric typewriters, 5 computers, at least a couple printers, well, more than a couple printers in doing that. Oh, well, anyways, part of.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Stuff.
What are some of the new technologies that might be helpful to historical societies? Like the pictures, you take an old photograph and then go to an app, and if there is one in existence, maybe they'll come up together and you find out who that person
Well, yeah,
is.
there's certainly that going on. Frank Hubble, of course, as you know, is our new
Yes.
technical guru, I guess, and that type of activity.
Yeah.
So what exactly he has planned for the society, I'm not sure.
That
But
would
you
be
can be
good.
assured it'll be really beneficial.
That would be helpful, though, because all these old photographs, people didn't write their names or who the people were.
Yeah.
And we're struggling to find out who they are. You don't really want to throw them out because you know they came from somebody here in town. But who is that person?
Yeah.
That would be a wonderful help. And the other thing is, I've seen somebody with an app where they can take a picture of an object. Let's say, maybe that plate in there.
Okay.
And it'll tell you all about where that plate came from or what it is. A piece of glassware, some artifact in the museum. And you can take a picture of it and you'll get an explanation on its age, who made it, all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Those are interesting possibilities.
Yes.
And another interesting app is one where you can, if you're out walking and you hear a bird chirping, you can take a video of that bird, or if you can't find the bird, you can record the chirping.
Just the sound,
and
yes.
It'll come back and tell you exactly what that bird was.
Yeah.
What the species was. So there's some interesting things that are here already. It's just a lot of us haven't discovered them yet or haven't put them into full use.
There's a lot of front-end work that needs to be done in that. For example, you got to find somebody who just loves to sit down and record birds.
Yes.
And they've got to put that on a database somewhere. And they have to coordinate that database.
Front-end
It
work.
takes a long time before listen to this warble and
Yeah.
say, oh yeah, that's a yellow-breasted something.
Mike, do you have more questions you'd like to ask?
I just just a couple things, Dave. If you want to explain where we're coming from tonight, there's a good background behind you, and maybe when people can come to see you
Oh,
or the
yes.
Parma Historical Society. But I before I get to that, I guess learning a lot about Ed. Um, Talked a little bit about a sister Dee. How many family members did you have in terms of sisters?
The two sisters,
Okay.
Dee and Lola Ray.
Okay.
Lola Ray has passed away, but Dee went to Syracuse University and in special education. Got a wonderful job in California.
Okay.
And stayed there all her life, and just recently moved to Seattle and retired from that work.
And then your mother, was she a homemaker, or what did she do for a job?
A homemaker. She never had a job. You know my mother. My mother was born with a silver spoon in her mouth.
Okay.
I have part of ham radio. I have in my collection of stuff a key that you would send Morse code on. The key belonged to a ham radio operator in her hometown of Corey, Pennsylvania. And when she went to college in Syracuse, she would have her ham friends send messages. Laundry should arrive on Tuesday. Another message. Laundry is done. Will arrive on Friday. She never did laundry. Anyways, she used ham radio for that. And years and years and years later, they stayed friends and stayed Christmas cards and what have you. And finally, one day, this box came, and it was a key, very nice, old antique key. And a little note was saying, this was a key that I sent your mother's notes on.
Who sent it?
It was her friend.
Her friend.
She knew way back from Syracuse University days. Yeah.
Interesting. Your mom was very involved in community affairs, as I remember. Civic affairs. Everybody knew her at the school, and she was a lot of fun. I remember she had a good laugh and was always welcoming and fun to meet and speak with. And,
it was. Our front door was always open.
Well,
never locked.
Is there anything that we've missed here? We've covered a lot of ground tonight. It's been
great.
You
did. I hope we haven't bored anybody out there.
No. We've covered. We've gotten some interesting history out here that has been recorded, and it's been fun. Besides, and great way to spend the end of the Memorial Day holiday.
Yeah, well, true.
7:00 in the museum. Well, this is not the museum here. This is the Village of Hilton Historian's office, which has been here for some 50 years, I believe. The first historian was Leith Wright, and the second one was Mary Townsend. I'm the third one. Mike has done podcasts here before, and we're delighted to have had you come tonight. And
my pleasure.
We're right in the heart of Hilton here, the old high school.
Yes, we are
above the shooting range.
The one with the shooting range, right?
So I guess we're pretty well finished. And thank you so much, Ed, for taking your time to come in and visit with all of us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Record history.
Really enjoyed every moment of it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I would like to thank Dave Crumb for taking over the hosting duties, and Ed, fascinating information I learned about you. Thank you for our listeners and our watchers, and anybody out there that wants to come on and tell us their history and their moments of Hilton, just contact Mr. Dave Crumb, and we'll get you on.
Mike, it's wonderful what you're doing with this podcast business, because it's a very comfortable way to record history, where we aren't trying to think of things, we're just talking along, and it just sort of spills out. And Ed and I go back a long way, and though our lives parted when I left Hilton for 20 years, but we came back again with the Historical Society, and here we are tonight just reflecting on common ground, and then ground that isn't so common, that I'm not familiar with. So it's been a great opportunity, and thank you for what you're doing.
Indeed.
You're very welcome. I get a lot out of it, and I'm going to pass this along, not just in podcast information, but I like to go home and tell my wife about things that I learned and all that. So this has been Mike Heiss along with Dave Crumb, Conversations with Crumb and Ed Gable, and we thank you very much for joining us.
Do you remember playing taps at military funerals?